Hello, welcome to Book Talk with Brock. My name is Brock Peters, and in this channel I select one book each episode to talk about and review. And today I'm going to talk about one of my very favorite books by one of my very favorite authors. Haruki Murakami is a Japanese writer whose works are translated into English, and he's become, in the past couple of decades, something of a literary superstar. His popularity sprung out of Japan, where he became very well known for his novel Norwegian Wood, and it spread pretty much over the entire world. He's been placed very high on bettors lists to win the Nobel Prize for Literature the last number of years, although he hasn't won it yet. And I struggled a bit with which of his books I wanted to talk about, and I'm sure I'll do talks on some of his other books later on. But I figured I'd start at the beginning. Today I'm going to talk about the first Murakami novel I read, and that was The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. This is a book in 3 parts, and it follows the misadventures of a man named Toru Okada, who, like most of Murakami's protagonists, is a fairly normal guy in his mid-30s, who doesn't really have much excitement going on in his life. He's unemployed when the novel opens, and his cat has just run away. And cats are a big theme in Murakami's writing, to the point that sometimes you go, okay, Murakami, enough about the cats, because they're in pretty much everything he writes. But the cats run away, and then not long after, his wife disappears as well. The rest of the novel is spent explaining his searching for both his wife and his cat, and along the way he meets a very, very large cast of really quirky, unusual characters. And there are a lot of links in the novel between events going on in Toru Okada's life and events that went on in Japan's past, particularly in the 10 years sort of encompassing the Second World War. I first read this novel about 5 years ago, and I was captivated by the way that Murakami writes in really conversational, casual, sort of straightforward prose. But he also manages to incorporate really mystical, almost magical realist elements into his writing as well. There's something really relaxing I find about reading Murakami's writing. It's kind of like an older guy is telling you a story and going on at length and just kind of embellishing the hell out of it. And almost instantly it became one of my favorite novels. You notice my bookshelf is askew here because it usually fits right in there. And I really wanted to reread The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle after having read a number of his other books, including his latest one to come out in English, which was 1Q84. And I thought 1Q84 was the most comparable book I've read to The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. So I wanted to read it again to sort of see if my idea of the book matched my memory or my recollections of the book. And while I did get a kick out of reading it the second time, I didn't like it as much as I remember liking it before. The sense of the mystical was still there, but some of the magic was gone. And I think I can explain that in a couple of different ways. First off, I do find that Murakami becomes a little bit repetitive after a while. I've gotten used to his style of writing, the kinds of characters he writes, usually normal 30-something-year-old guys, and the themes he likes to explore. So now I kind of feel like I've been backstage to a certain extent, whereas before it was all new. And in between my 2 readings, I also read things like David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, which is right there, where, though it's a pretty long book, and I mean, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, it's a project, not to the same extent as Infinite Jest, but it's a big book. But in Infinite Jest, I got the impression that every word was important. The prose was just so tight. And rereading Wind-Up Bird, I found myself getting irritated by some of Murakami's descriptions, where it felt like he's just using too many damn pages to say something like, okay, Murakami, I get it. I understand what you're trying to say. Let's move on, you know. And I felt kind of guilty for thinking that way, because I really do admire Murakami's writing, and Wind-Up Bird is still one of my favorite books. But I suppose I've been building it up in my mind a bit since that first magical reading. I think that Murakami's seemingly relaxed attitude towards his prose is what gives it such a casual, friendly feel and allows him to work mysterious elements into his plot so easily. It kind of reinforces the idea for me of an older storyteller who's talking a bit too long and he drifts off into a tangent that's only slightly related to the book, and including details that often seem unnecessary, but serve to really suspend the reader's disbelief and make the reader feel comfortable with these kind of strange things that keep happening. So I'll definitely be talking more about Murakami later on, and to be honest, I'm not sure anymore that Wind-Up Bird would be the novel I'd recommend if you haven't read Murakami before, but it is a captivating read, and a very good introduction to his style, the only drawback being that it does kind of drag on. I had a bit of trouble finding a passage to read, and I settled on one that I think is just brilliant. It makes me laugh, and it's kind of quirky, but it's still a pretty good example of Murakami's style, except usually he doesn't swear quite this much. This is the main character, Toru Okada, talking to his nemesis, Noboru Wataya, in a tea room. And let me just find it here. There we go. When he had finished speaking, a deep silence settled over the table. "Do you know the story of the monkeys of the Shitty Island?" I asked Noboru Wataya. He shook his head with no sign of interest. Never heard of it. "Somewhere, far, far away, there's a shitty island. An island without a name. An island not worth giving a name. A shitty island with a shitty shape. On this shitty island grow palm trees that also have shitty shapes. And the palm trees produce coconuts that give off a shitty smell. Shitty monkeys live in the trees, and they love to eat these shitty-smelling coconuts, after which they shit the world's foulest shit. The shit falls on the ground and builds up shitty mounds, making the shitty palm trees that grow on them even shittier. It's an endless cycle." I drank the rest of my coffee. "As I sat here looking at you," I continued, "I suddenly remembered the story of this shitty island. What I'm trying to say is this. A certain kind of shittiness, a certain kind of stagnation, a certain kind of darkness goes on propagating itself with its own power in its own self-contained cycle. And once it passes a certain point, no one can stop it, even if the person himself wants to stop it." This has been The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. The word of the day today is manchikuo, and I realize it's a proper noun, but that's one thing about Murakami's writing is it's very lyrical and it's very mystical, but he doesn't use a lot of really complex language to get his ideas across. He explains them at length, often in the simplest possible terms. And manchikuo plays a big role in the historical plot of the novel, and I hadn't heard of it before. I had to look it up to sort of figure out for myself what was really going on. It turns out that Manchukuo was a puppet state established in the early 1930s by Imperial Japan. It was established in a region that today is known as Northeast China, and historically has been called Manchuria. It was highly contested at the time, since it bordered the Soviet Union to the north, China to the west, and then the Japanese Empire and Korea to the south. And in 1945, the Soviet Union invaded Manchukuo, and it crumbled under the pressure of their invasion. The following year, it was returned to Chinese power. So I guess that's kind of a history lesson rather than a word of the day, but that is Manchukuo in a nutshell. Thanks very much for watching Book Talk with Brock. If you'd like to learn more about me and my own writing, you can head over to brockpeters.ca. I've got a blog and some writing samples over there. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button. I'm Brock Peters, and I'll see you next time.